Chuck Ochelli.
'Tis the 17th day of June 2016, according to that thing we call a calendar, and this is the Ochelli-Effect broadcast live on American Freedom Radio at AmericanFreedomRadio.com, where the live show does originate from. So, what are we going to do today? Actually, it's kind of interesting because I have migrated to the state of Georgia in an undisclosed location at the moment, but I am in the state of Georgia now, and guess what? That is where I'm going to remain. That is exactly where I'm planting my feet. That is where I'm staying, and I see that there is going to be a lot of work that is going to be required of me. Who do I have on tonight's show? Well, I have Derrick Grayson, the Minister of Truth in the first hour, and I cannot wait to have this conversation with him. I told him on air before that he was one of the very few individuals that I have heard of running for office in the very recent past that I would actually go and vote for. I don't have a lot of faith in the process, I've got to tell you. I don't have a lot of faith in any of these political parties, associations, et cetera, and I certainly have no faith in most of the people that do run for political office. But you know what? I recognize the truth when I hear it. I recognize individuals who are actually Americans at heart that actually wish to do the right thing. Doesn't necessarily mean that I agree with absolutely everything that Mr. Grayson has to say. I don't have to. In fact, all I have to do is be able to entrust to him the ability to serve the people that he has been elected to serve if he is so elected. Thus far, that has not been the case. And we're going to get into that with Derrick in just a few minutes. I do see him on the line, and he'll be on with me on the phone in just a moment. Before I get to that, though, I want to say something else. Due to the fact that this has been kind of an abrupt thing that has happened, and I do appreciate the support from, of course, Patricia B., who has been my absolute most consistent supporter throughout the entire time that I have been doing what I am doing. Much love and appreciation to you, Patricia. Of course, my friend Ed, and there were some others who also made sure that I wasn't completely empty-handed as I went through this process. I just want to say that as this continues and as I attempt to establish myself here in the state of Georgia, it is going to it's going to be something that might require some help from you guys, and I am going to do some things differently. In fact, I'm going to get very, very involved with things coming up very shortly. I'm in the process now of educating myself regarding exactly what it is I can do, and in fact, I'm going to ask Derrick Grayson specifically, directly. I'm going to confront him about this. I want to know what I can do and where I can go and what I should be looking at right in the place where I'm sitting today. Anyway, let me get right to it, okay? Let's see now. Mr. Grayson, can you hear me, sir?
Man, I hear you loud and clear. How you doing?
Oh, excellent, excellent. I am so happy to have you on the show tonight, and I'm sure you heard some of my comments leading into the time when I was able to bring you on the phones here, and I do appreciate you taking this time with me. First of all, I want to be real honest with you. I'm somebody who has felt as though the political process has nothing to do with me, the common citizen, has nothing to do with my will, has nothing to do with the desires of the people. This is the way that I feel. I feel as though most of the characters that have been selected into offices are actually there to be placeholders for individuals that have nothing to do with my daily life, with the things that actually affect me that I care about anywhere. Now, I have just landed in Georgia, and very, very soon, I'll be recognized as a legal resident. Okay, that's going to happen. And I'm going to start off with the hardest question possible here to you, because you're somebody who's been involved with the political system here. You're somebody who has got plenty of experience. You're somebody who has been derailed by the mainstream. But here's the deal. I'm an alternative media person. I am landed right here, and I want to know from scratch, what is it that you would tell me to do to get, I really want marching orders from you. What is it I can do to affect the situation that I see here right in front of me? Again, I ask this question of you because I recognize integrity when I hear it. And it's not necessarily, like I said, that I agree with every single position you have ever uttered or anything like that. You and I don't necessarily see eye to eye. But here's the thing. Once again, I believe that you are a trustworthy individual who, if so chosen, would actually pay attention to the will of the people that you have been elected to represent. So, an honest question from somebody who is going to find a way so that I am part of that process right here in Georgia and in Houston County specifically. What is it that I should do starting from scratch? I want to hit the ground running, sir.
Okay. Well, that's a great question. It's funny that you asked that question because I did a live video feed on Facebook earlier. The title of it was, "Is America Screwed?" America is being screwed, without a doubt. What you just articulated moments ago about people being selected, not really giving a damn about your concerns or your issues, only their own. All of that is true. But there is hope. And so, being that you asked me, what can you do? One, recognize the problem. Now, with the gentleman that I was speaking with earlier in my live, and I gave him 5 things that he could do to affect change because he's already recognized that there is a problem. So with you, it's going to be 6. So number 1, you need to recognize the problem. What is the problem? And I'll be honest, I think you understand what the problem is. But I don't know if you know the breadth of the problem. The whole breadth of the problem is not the other party or that candidate over there or those group of voters over here or the welfare folks over there or the racists over there. That is not the problem. Those are divisions. The problem is both parties are corrupt. We have a political system that is corrupt to the hilt. I put together a graphic called the Circle of Loot that shows how it operates, and I won't get into explaining that. So if first people can recognize that both parties are corrupt, you've won half the battle. So what's next? You want to know what you can do. Number 1,
right.
Decide in your mind that you know this ain't got nothing to do with race. There is no white privilege, and the powers that be care as much about Negroes as they do white people, which is nothing. All they care about is their power. So you have to be willing to step out of it's about race, because it's not. When Donald Trump talked about building a wall and banning all Muslims, what Donald Trump is really talking about, who are the people that are coming in that are trying to kill us and destroy our economy. That has nothing to do with race. And being Mexican is not a race. That is how dumbed down we have become here in America. And I'm not saying all of that to indicate that I'm a supporter of Trump. I'm not saying that I'm not going to vote for Trump. I'm not saying I'm going to vote for him. I'm simply pointing out the facts of what Donald Trump has said. So 1, race, or 2, in your case, race is not the issue. 3, make it in your mind that you will no longer look at the R or the D. They are the problem. Because we will not turn off the TV, radio, or stop reading garbage ads put out or garbage articles put out by people like Jim Calloway, or listening to garbage radio hosts like Herman Cain. We continue to be led down that path. I can't tell you the number of times people will see me, and because I'm black, they'll come up and as a means to impress me. Oh, I so love Herman Cain. Of course, my response is, you're not doing me no favor, and it's not endearing you to me anymore. It's just showing me that you drink the party line Kool-Aid like everybody else. Herman Cain carries water for the establishment. End of story.
Right.
I know this for a fact.
And race is irrelevant. This is an absolutely perfect salient point that needs to be gotten to, because we have for far too long been divided along many different lines. We need to understand, in my estimation, I want you to correct me, but I believe that we need to understand, first of all, that there is an us and them, okay? There is an us and them. But the us is not divided the way that they've always told us. Okay? There is an us and them, and the us and them has to do with the fact that that political system that you were talking about being corrupt and the circle of loot, absolutely, it is all bought and paid for. Bought and paid for, top to bottom. Again, I'm just giving you a chance to breathe here and telling you I'm hearing every single thing you're saying so far, but please continue.
Sure. Well, once we recognize that it's not about race, once we recognize the problem, we recognize it's not about race, we recognize that both parties are corrupt, then we are prepared to go to the next level once we turn off the TV, the radio, et cetera, and start looking at candidates. Now, I say this up front to people. I always explain to them what progressive and conservative mean, because most folks don't have a clue. Jimmy Carter saw to that with the Department of Education. Progressive means that as you move through time, you change how things have been done because you think you can find better ways to do it. I'll give you an example of progressive. Gender identity. Hey, if a guy identifies as a woman, he ought to be able to use the female's rental. That is progressive. Other example of progressivism. Hey, if people don't want to go and work, we should provide for them, even though it is not mandated by our Constitution. That is progressivism. I could go on and on and on. What is conservatism? Conservatism is basically stick with what works. We know that a man and a woman married together and raising their children together, teaching them what it is to be a man and a woman, that tends to work. Why get away from that? But progressivism say Johnny can have two mommies or Sally can have two daddies, and that'll work just fine. It's all poppycock. Doesn't work. This is not how things were intended to be. I mean, even the birds and the bees know that male and female raise their children. But anyway, I'm digressing because I don't want to make this about homosexuality, because that's not what this is about. I'm simply trying to give you some examples of what progressivism is and what conservatism is. Right. So you will not find conservatives in the liberal Democrat Party because they have become progressives. So it'll be hard to seek out a candidate that actually believes in the Constitution 100% of it, 100% of the time. In order to do so, that would mean that you are a conservative. And typically, conservatives are not members of the Democratic Party. Well, what about the Republican Party? You have people that say that they are conservatives, like Johnny Isaacson and Nathan Deal, but they are not true conservatives. They are neocons. They are progressives. They are rhinos. They are sheep, wolves in sheep's clothing, pretending to be conservative, but they are not. And that is the biggest problem with the Republican Party. They have been infiltrated. But what allows them to persist are the supporters of these types of candidates, supporters that believe that their guy through cognitive dissonance is got to be the right guy, and they'll support Johnny Isaacson till the death, and the same with progressives in the Democratic Party. So you, as the individual, has to understand what the Constitution is about, understand that conservative ideals have worked for centuries, and when people got away from it, that is when those civilizations died. And I can give you examples: the children of Israel in Rome, and Babylon, etc. I can go on and on and on. But so pick candidates that you believe to be true conservatives. If you can't find one, run yourself. Okay. And then the last thing, understand that it only takes one man or woman to make a difference. One man can stiffen the spines of a whole room full of spineless men simply by standing up first, and others will tend to follow suit. We have to reach one, each of us, each one, reach one, teach one. That is how we build our numbers. And you don't need masses to make a difference. It has always been a few that made the difference. You said earlier that I had been derailed. I have never been derailed. I went from 6,000 votes in 2014 to 68,000 votes in 2016. We made headway, and I'm not done. And as long as I've got breath in my body, I shall reach more people. And all that we accomplished was not because the press helped us and told us the truth. I met a man tonight at a restaurant. We just chit-chatting. He owns 30 Burger Kings here in the Atlanta, Georgia area, in the Atlanta area. And we got to talking about politics. He saw me open carrying my weapon, and we talked about that. And then I told him, well, you know, I ran for Senate. I said, you saw my name on the ballot. Did you vote? He said, yes. I said, I voted. Did you vote Republican? He said, yes, I did. I said, well, you had a choice of three people, Mayor K. Bakiao, Johnny Isaacson, or Derrick Grayson. He said, well, you know, I didn't recognize your name. You voted for Johnny Isaacson. But he said, well, man, you know, I just didn't know. That is our problem. People are not being taught, and people won't take time to research for themselves. So I educated one person tonight, and he told me the next time you run, you will have my support. So that's what this is about. So you want to know what you can do? Help me overcome the press. Educate yourself. Help me overcome the press. That is the only way we're going to beat them. And it can be done. We can make their millions meaningless if we go to the people ourselves and reach them. That's it. I'll shut up now.
Well, no, I don't want you to shut up, okay? First of all, I don't want you to shut up. Here's what I want to ask you, though, as I listen to this. There is a huge difference between what I see as a neocon, okay, and someone who is conservative. And neocons, to me, are very dangerous. In fact, now here's going to be probably a surprise to you, but to me, the behavior of somebody who is seemingly socially liberal, like the Democratic candidate for president right now, when it comes to foreign policy and all of that, behaves textbook neocon style. Okay? As far as I'm concerned, that's a neocon in a progressive's cloak. The worst of what could possibly ever be in power is what resides right there. Okay? These are both extremely perverted versions of things that I do believe are relevant. I believe that people should have the personal freedom to do as they choose without harming others. Okay? That is my belief system. And sometimes that crosses swords with people. But when it comes down to it, when it comes down to these like foreign involvements, when it comes down to not putting our own house in order and getting involved with all these other entanglements and things like that, that to me is a neocon style way of dealing with things, but it's certainly not conservative. To me also, on the other side, just as an example, and I don't mean to get you tied into the national selection process, okay, because I don't feel as though the people's choices are actually represented there. But on the other side of the equation, we have complete ignorance, as far as I'm concerned, regarding the sophistication of the entirety of what needs to be done on a foreign policy level. Okay? I don't care about the race. I don't care about the undertones which are being utilized to seize upon certain people's. I'm not a fool. I understand all of that. And I know all of it is garbage. It is time that we understand that there is a we the people, first of all. And I like that you keep mentioning the Constitution because, unless I'm incorrect here, that is the supreme law of this land. Okay? And when it comes to our officials that are supposed to represent us, I believe that their first order of business should be to adhere to that. Okay? Maybe I'm misguided, and I'd love to hear what you have to say about that. But I'll tell you something else. When it comes to getting the word out and trying to educate people and making people aware, right now, for as long as I'm able to do what I'm doing, I would like you to give me any kind of guidance along the way to let me know how it is I can disseminate this information for people in Georgia and for people everywhere. Okay? We'll discuss it a little more off the air at some point, but the people that I've met here so far, like my friends like Daniel Lewis Crumpton, okay, and other individuals who have been involved. In fact, one gentleman who was quite a bit active in the state of Georgia but is now in prison in Oregon, okay. I think you know who I'm talking about. That would be Jason.
Yes, I know you're talking about. Yep.
There is still much work to be done. And I want to add my voice to that. And I want to make sure that I educate myself and pass that on as best I can. But getting back to what I was saying before, I think it's entirely necessary for people to understand that these different agendas, which have been bought and paid for, have nothing to do with the original intent of this process. And I didn't mean to say that you were derailed in that you didn't make any progress, you understand. It's just that it's unfairly handled by the press and I think by the political parties. Now, maybe I'm wrong there too, but that's what I see.
Well, their agenda, I'm just simply saying that they didn't stop me from progressing. They impeded the progression somewhat, but we still proceeded forward. Did we get as far as we wanted to? No. There was still, of the 128,000 people that voted against Sonny Isaacson, there was still 377,000 that we couldn't touch. So, our goal is to continue moving forward. And we've not stopped. I'm campaigning right now for the next election. That's why I'm doing this interview. So there is no risk for me in this. You were talking about neocon. I simply use just two terms, and that is progressive or conservative.
Okay.
Anything that is not conservative, I put under the progressive category, whether it be, neocon or anything else. Anything that bastardizes original intent of anything is a progressive. And so you can throw your warmongers right on in there with them. So I try not to get too caught up on a lot of different terms because that confuses people. I try to keep things simple, stupid, and get them to just simply understand the difference between progressive and conservatism. And the guiding light that can restore this country is an adherence to our Constitution. And the greatest example that I can give to anybody is the children of Israel when they decided they wanted a king. And that's what many of us today want. We want king, somebody that's going to do it all for us because they said that they were. And I've studied ancient civilizations. All of them that failed, they failed because of corruption from either a small group of individuals like the corrupt Roman Senate when the Roman Republic failed, or the individual that left his son in charge when the Roman kingdom failed. A lot of people don't even know about that, but you got a king that went away and his son decided that he was so above, what was right, he raped the nobleman's wife. And of course that brought an end to the Roman monarchy. And that's when they got the Roman Republic. It lasted for 500 years because of the corruption of the Senate. And notice I use the word republic. They had elections. They believed in a rule of law, but they became corrupt. And that's where America is today. We have both a Senate and a Congress that are corrupt, and they too are modeled after the Roman system. If you remember, our senators were once elected by our state house representatives. But that's no longer the case. So our 17th Amendment, we elect our senators and we elect our representatives. They're both corrupt, and they're destroying this country. But they don't care because they get to feed their families, they get to enrich themselves, and the people get to starve and struggle. And this is where dictators find their opportunities in bringing about revolutions that are the wrong kind. Mao Zedong, Lenin are perfect examples. Julius Caesar. Because the monarchies or the republics were corrupt, these individuals stepped in, took an opportunity. And now I'm not saying that Donald Trump is going to be a tyrant, is corrupt, is going to do the wrong thing. I'm not saying that. But I am saying the anger and outrage that you see in American people and how they have gravitated towards Donald Trump, because Donald Trump is addressing the corruption of our political system, is not unlike the moves of the people when Lenin implemented communism in Russia, when Mao implemented communism in China, when Julius Caesar implemented a dictatorship in Rome. It was because he had the anger of the people with him, and they were against the established systems that were in place at the time that were corrupt. That is where we are headed, sir.
This is true, and without people beginning to take action on the local level, okay, none of this is going to evaporate. See, to me, I see both parties. Like you said, ignore the R, ignore the D. I'm looking at both sides of that equation. And again, to use the national election as just an example, it seems to me as though I'm offered corruption and corruption. Okay? I see nothing that is not corrupt on the national level at this point in time. So there is where I leave that. Again, I don't want to drag you into that. I would much rather talk about what I can do hands-on myself. All right? And trying to educate people and absolutely enlightening them as to the rights that they still do have, although they are being eroded. Okay? To enlighten people as to those particular rights, I think is an absolutely valid thing to do. But there have been people who have been swept away in this process. Now, you have not. You are going to continue to fight like you said. Yeah, can you hear me, sir?
Hello?
Yeah, can you hear me? All right. We may have actually something happened there, and I think I lost Mr. Grayson temporarily. But, you know, I'm going to wait for him to come back around on the line. I'm hoping that he will reemerge there in just a moment. You know, it's difficult sometimes to do these things via cell phone and stuff like that. But nonetheless, the points of corruption that he's talking about and the basis for our government having been perverted, it seems to me as though we do live in a time of progressivism, and in that way, that which I was identifying as neocon could very easily also be swept into the progressive zone. Like you said, when you get away from the initial intent, the initial let's say the initial motive for the creation and the function of our government, when you get away from that and you begin to twist these things, it begins to take many a turn. And much like the Roman Senate and these other governments that have existed before, whether it be in Russia, whether it be in China, whether it be elsewhere, this is what happens. The further you go, the distortion becomes even greater from the original source. And so let's try and define a little bit. Can you hear me now, Mr. Grayson?
Yeah, you're just fine.
All right. Maybe it would be useful to kind of put a fine point on what is conservative actually, and what you mean by really adhering to the initial intent of things just a little more, because we can see the twists and turns of how things have changed and how things have been hijacked, in my estimation, for various agendas and to the highest bidder. That is the way it has gone. But what do we mean by the original intent?
Okay. I'm going to give you probably the best example. Original intent, obviously, what was it intended for initially? Let's look at the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment dealt with slaves and their descendants not being afforded their right to be recognized as United States citizens. Mm-hmm. That was initially the original intent of the 14th Amendment. And to give a little backdrop to that, Lincoln gave us the Emancipation Proclamation. But what a lot of people don't understand, had we simply obeyed the spirit of the Declaration of Independence that talked about all men being created equal and endowed with certain inalienable rights, the rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, where if the Negro were viewed in that light as a man with everyone else, we would never have had slavery. Okay? We would never have had slavery. But in the eyes of the men that drafted that document, that is how they viewed what men were. But there were others that didn't. And in the drafting of our Constitution, there were those that were not strong-willed enough to stand up and stamp out slavery, which had already existed. I mean, slavery goes back to 1400, late 1400s. But nothing was done to stamp it out. There wasn't a will to do that because they were more focused on other priorities, one forming the United States. So let me move forward. Lincoln gave us the Emancipation Proclamation, but there were two states that would still not free the slaves. So Lincoln said, okay, so the Emancipation Proclamation is not sticking. The original intent of the Emancipation Proclamation was that maybe they recognize the original intent of the Declaration of Independence in that preamble. All right, so that ain't working. So what am I going to do?
No, so the truth is, if we had adhered to the initial document, it would not have even been necessary to introduce this other amendment or to introduce any other law had we simply followed the true spirit of the initial document.
Of the Declaration of Independence, yes. We wouldn't have needed the Emancipation Proclamation. Well, we did need it. And still 2 states wouldn't free the Negroes that were in captivity. So Lincoln says, so that people later down the line don't view this as simply a wartime act, I'm going to push for an amendment, a constitutional amendment. We got the 13th Amendment, making that a law of the land, which freed all Negroes. But there are some white people that said, well, you know what, I'm never going to consider a nigger as my equal. How can we thwart this? Not recognize their citizenship. So then they had to go back to the drawing board again and give us the 14th Amendment. It wasn't sticking still. Then they said, okay, all right, so Negroes are free, they're citizens. I'll be damned if I'm going to let them vote and have a say in what we do in this country. So we got the 15th Amendment. But what a lot of people don't know is, before we got the 15th Amendment, the Democrats actually tried to repeal the 13th and 14th Amendments. And everybody so loves Democrats for their magnanimity. Or I do a little history research. But anyway, so we ended up getting the 15th Amendment. That still wasn't enough. Still wasn't enough. And because of the Compromise of 1877, the North agreed to remove the troops from the South and let the South rebuild and move on and do whatever they wanted to do. And the South said, y'all leave us alone with our Negroes down here in the South, and, you know, we'll go ahead and go on and become a part of this union, not resist it any further. And then in the 1890s, we got Jim Crow laws, or the Black Codes. We got those because the Emancipation Proclamation wasn't enough. 13th Amendment wasn't enough. 14th Amendment wasn't enough. 15th Amendment wasn't enough. So they gave us the Black Codes to circumvent the law again.
Right.
Then we ended up having to get this Civil Rights legislation of 64 and the Voting Rights Act of 65. This one sticking. Okay. Finally, it stuck. And then, of course, you know, we still have people doing things, you know, behind the scenes, but I'm not going to get in that. You were talking about original intent. So I'm giving you how you can have original intent, but people find ways to circumvent it. And the most modern day method of that is the 14th Amendment and anchor babies. Illegals come across the border, drop a baby on American soil, and now that baby has birthright citizenship. That was never the original intent of the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment was about how blacks were being treated by the racists of the South. So have I made my point clear on original intent? What was the original intent of the article or the amendment? That's what we should stick to. That is being conservative. Now I have people come back and say, well, you know, the Constitution, you know, called for, you know, blacks only being counted as 3/5 of a human being. I say, sir, that is bogus because all of that got squashed, you know, as a result of the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. So the amendment process is to fix defects in our Constitution, and it fixed those defects. The problem is people will always find ways to go around it, just like Obama utilizing executive orders, just like Bush using the War Powers Act when only Congress should be allowed to declare war. I could go on and on and on and on. Hopefully I've said enough that people might now understand what I mean when I say original intent. And
well,
how
right.
we get around obeying the Constitution.
Absolutely, and I think we have actually reached a point of critical mass where, honestly, those corrections that were made by the amendments have actually they made their point and it was done. But here's the thing: we have come to a point now where, truthfully, the concept of slavery has been now removed to a secondary state. And truthfully, we're in a state of free range slavery, in my estimation, in this country, because we have all been.
As of 1913. As
yes,
of 1913.
Yes, sir.
The Federal Reserve Act, the IRS, and the 16th Amendment made us all slaves of the federal government and the central bank. Yes, we're now all slaves.
And this brings me immediately to the idea of those who have tried to speak up for the concept of going back to restoring the Constitution. Okay, restoring the Constitution. That is the position we are in right now. We need to restore the behaviors that were laid forth in the Constitution. And it brings me right to, of course, once again, the idea of what's going on with Jason Patrick and how that was turned into what it was, and I don't want to get in deep on that right now. But for those that wish to step forward and become activists on the local level, on the regional level, on any level, in fact, you know, what would you say about those that want to stand up and do something, but obviously, you know, don't want to wind up in a situation where Patrick is? He's in a prison cell right now, and I mean, you know who this man is. You know what we're talking about here, and not necessarily about the particulars of that situation. That's a whole other show. But the idea that there was somebody standing up for that concept and the way he was dealt with, you know, within the system, you know, what would you say to somebody else that wants to stand up and do that very same thing?
Everything possible until there's no alternatives left but bullets. So that's what I tell folks. I have an arsenal, but I shall utilize all means available to me through jurisprudence. First, when I went to go visit Clive and Bundy, I didn't go with a weapon. I didn't ask for a weapon because I went there to support. I follow the model of Martin Luther King, nonviolent protest and opposition, and I speak my mind. So I'm not here second guessing what Jason did, but what people need to understand, if that's the path you're willing to walk down, you know, be prepared to, you know, deal with the consequences. As simple as that. I'm willing to die for what I believe in, and if the time ever comes to where someone tells me to be quiet because I no longer have a fight, then I shall take up my arm. So that's that. But I shall not foolishly, and I'm not saying Jason did that, I shall not go to Washington, D.C., where there are laws, valid or not, in place that says I can't show up with a shotgun. I'll fight to get that law overturned first, if that were on my radar. So I'm simply saying there's a way to do everything, and I'm not second guessing Jason's choices. I pray that Jason is exonerated and released so that he can get back in the fight. I don't agree with how that situation was handled. No one was violent towards the government, but when you know how the government operates, you try to use countermeasures to prevent yourself from being put in that situation. And so here's where we are.
Right, and I absolutely believe that that one should utilize every single mechanism at their disposal, including all of that which is contained in the First Amendment of the Constitution, which is your right to free expression in many different ways. I think that is the first step. Of course, the Second Amendment is valuable, but I believe that all of those first 10 are certainly the core of what we still have left to exercise, although they have been, as I said before, somewhat degraded by the process and by that removal of original intent by other things which have been added on. I'm very sure that you would agree that we should utilize every single mechanism, whether it be the courts, our right to protest, our right to stand up and participate in any local or regional way that we can, to let our voices be heard, to let our will be understood, right? These things are absolutely necessary, along with the other options that, if it comes down to it, it comes down to it. But truth is that we need to exercise all of this to the best of our abilities. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, certainly will. Look, I was running for office. I also ran to be a delegate. I participated in my precinct, district, and county, state meeting. I participate, and, every opportunity I get for my voice to be heard, I take it. Why? Because each one must reach one, and I try to reach many individuals that they may be awakened. So that's how I do it. I'm involved. I'm engaged. The only way to overcome the enemy is to reach out to those that the enemy has as its followers. And look, the most dangerous man in any country is the one that has sway with the people when he's telling the truth.
Right.
Governments fear that more than anything. The one thing that governments try to do now is not make martyrs out of people, which is why after Nixon and Watergate, they brought up all of the media. Most media is owned by corporate entities. That's the whole purpose of that. Control the media, control the education system. It'll be much harder for the individual to reach the masses. So our job is to find a way to overcome the media. So that is it in a nutshell.
Right, and your point is well taken when it comes down to the fact that that people in the past, they would silence individuals who were dangerous by their speech, often with bullets. Obviously, Dr. King is the first example that comes to mind. I believe that they were perfectly willing to let him speak out about a great many things until he directly challenged the Vietnam War. Quite honestly, I think that because he held such sway with so many people, that his voice was heard by so many, that this is exactly what made him so dangerous. And it is my firm belief that this directly led to his assassination. Okay. Mm-hmm. And yep. I have a feeling that you would agree with me there. Now,
yes, I agree.
And look, we're running kind of low on time, and so I want to give people the opportunity to be able to find where they can look into you if they've never heard of you before, if they are only just vaguely aware of you, what it is that they can begin to do specifically regarding your efforts. But in general, if you like, anything that you'd like to throw out there for people to just become engaged, because as you said, that is the important thing. Not everybody's going to run for office. Not everybody is going to necessarily have a radio show, but whatever. What would be the starting point, and what can we do to specifically support your efforts, because you're not going to stop. I know that.
No, I'm not going to stop. I'm just going to say people should Google Derrick Grayson or TMOT, T-M-O-T. We shut down our campaign website. We're revamping it.
I am still here. I'm not aware of what exactly is going on there. Let's see. I can't figure that one out. That's a strange piece of electronic information right about it exactly, or electronic disruption, I should say, at exactly the moment where I say to Mr. Grayson, well, what is it we can do on a local level here to become completely engaged and what it is we can do to support him. Let's try one more time. Nope, I cannot get a hold of this. Look, everybody out there, what I suggest you do is go ahead and Google, all right, Derrick Grayson, or look him up on Facebook, et cetera, et cetera. Take a look at what it is that he is doing, and understand that he has quite a bit been marginalized by the mainstream, that's for sure. He is definitely somebody who, like I said, I don't necessarily agree with every single position that I've ever heard him take, but there is a level of integrity with this gentleman which is undeniable. And there will be a lot more that I'm going to have to say on this show coming up very, very soon regarding my direct involvement in things here locally. It is absolutely time to take action, and it doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to be just involved in elections. I do mean that on a very significant level, face-to-face with individuals in my local community, this is where I'm going to begin to do a lot more than just speak on this show, and I hope that you guys out there listening will go through this journey with me, and will begin to understand that this is our obligation to begin to take action as well, not to just sit and complain about everything, but there's going to be a lot of things coming up very, very soon. Anyway, I don't know exactly what happened there with the electronic, disruption. It's very strange. Never had that one happen before on a phone line. But look, in the next hour, we're going to be talking to Cynthia McKinney, who, in case you haven't heard of her, you might have actually seen her in passing on certain 9/11 documentaries. This is somebody who, again, for different reasons, I would say, certainly decidedly different from Mr. Grayson. But another political figure who is here in Georgia, and somebody that actually I've wanted to interview for the past couple of years, because there are many amazing things that she has gotten involved in and actually put her hands on, not limited to just her local government and her responsibilities as an administrator of the will of the people. No. In fact, Miss McKinney at one point was even involved in relief efforts on an international level, and there's probably a lot of stories we can get to. As per usual, none of this is ever scripted or choreographed, so who knows where we'll actually go in the next hour with Cynthia McKinney, but I'm looking quite a bit forward to it. And again, I say look up Derrick Grayson, last name spelled Grayson, and Derrick E. Grayson is how you would find him on Facebook. You'll see that he was running for office recently and has been running for office, and as he said before, he is certainly not done yet. And neither are we. The Ochelli Effect is going to a break here on American Freedom Radio, but we will return in the second hour with Cynthia McKinney. I hope that you guys stick with me, because this is going to be one for the books as well. And thank you, Mr. Grayson. Sorry that we had an electronic problem at the end there, but so the second hour of the Ochelli Effect begins here on American Freedom Radio at AmericanFreedomRadio.com. And I don't want to spend too much time discussing things in my opening as I usually do for the second hour, because I am extremely thrilled. One of the people that I have wanted to have on this show since its beginning, honestly, is with me tonight, Cynthia McKinney. Now, in case for some odd reason you're not aware of who Cynthia McKinney is, you might be, if you're a regular listener of this show, vaguely aware of the fact that she comes up in discussion quite often. In fact, with Maria Heller, with Jack Blood, with lots of different figures. Why? Why does Cynthia McKinney come up in discussions on this show? Here it is, very bottom line. I have not pulled a lever for a presidential candidate since the last time there was somebody named Clinton available to be voted for. Okay. Why? Because what I stated at the beginning of the first hour is absolutely true. I feel as though the political process has absolutely nothing to do with me and the rest of the serfs that are out here. This is the way that I feel about it. I feel as though the political parties are absolutely bought and paid for from top to bottom. But with that being said, there are a rare handful of individuals who I think have integrity, who, even though if I don't necessarily agree with every single position that they have taken publicly, I absolutely believe that if I were to pull that lever and that person were to be elected, okay, to serve, not selected as I believe they are right now, but if that person were to be elected to serve in this country's construct of government the way it was intended to be, I actually believe that there's a handful of people that would attempt to execute the will of the people. I really do. And guess what? If Cynthia McKinney was a presidential candidate this year, I would lift my moratorium on voting and I would actually step into the process to do that. And there you go. I wasn't even willing to get out there, even though I did support a lot of the Ron Paul concept, not entirely, but I did support a lot of what he had to say. Cynthia McKinney is somebody that I would absolutely vote for, and I would be proud to see become president of the United States. That's exactly how I feel about her. That's exactly what I think of the person that I have observed from a distance, and I'm extremely happy to have this opportunity to have a conversation with you tonight. How are you tonight?
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to come on your show, first of all. And I would just say let's keep this conversation going after we hang up today. Let's stay in touch with each other and keep the conversation going. I'm very pleased to be with you and your audience.
Well, thank you. You know, and this is not, you know, it seems odd. Some people would say it's kind of odd because my political persuasion might not necessarily comport entirely with, let's just say, all of the public record of positions that you have necessarily taken. But my understanding is, like I said, see, I've asked this question over and over again, and a lot of people don't want to answer it. But here's the thing. I have this crazy notion that regardless of what your views are, I do believe that if the will of the people was known to you, that is precisely what you would attempt to make sure was implemented if you were put into a much, and you have held political office, but yes. The thing is, I think that you are the type of person that would actually attempt, and this is a strange statement coming out of my mouth because, like I said, anybody who's had a D or an R by their name, as far as I'm concerned, has been bought and paid for by somebody. Okay? There are the rare exceptions, and I think you're one of them. And an example to the listener who doesn't necessarily immediately recognize Cynthia McKinney's name, well, let me tell you, if you look very closely at some 9/11 documentaries, she had some questions. She had some interesting questions, in fact. And there's also a very fascinating incident, which I've only heard about third hand, to be honest with you, regarding your adventures going to Palestine.
Oh, yes.
Okay. And I want to get into both of these things with you as just a primer for somebody who may have not encountered you before, but you're somebody that I do personally respect, and I want to make sure I give this groundwork to the people out there that are listening. So first of all, you know, your appearances in those documentaries, we know which ones we're talking about, right?
Yes.
But you had some interesting questions, and very logical, sensible things that I think people brought to your attention and that you learned on your own. And yes. There you go. Somebody who's not cloaking themselves in the atmosphere, let's just say, of somebody who's being a truther or anything like that, but somebody who actually just stood there and very bravely had some very common sense opposition, let's say, to the official story. I wonder if you wouldn't kind of capsulize that for people, or even tell them if that's changed since the time you were part of those documentaries, those presentations I've seen.
Well, first of all, it's my understanding that the power of the people resides in the U.S. Congress. And so it is a responsibility of the U.S. Congress to make policy and to oversee the execution of that policy by the executive branch. And so, for example, if one is on the Education Committee, then one is charged with looking into the policies that are set by the Congress and their implementation by the U.S. Department of Education. And so it goes. Foreign Affairs Committee or International Relations Committee has jurisdiction over the Department of State. Armed Services Committee has jurisdiction over the Pentagon. And Budget Committee has jurisdiction over this entire process of determining how U.S. taxpayer dollars are spent. So with that understanding, then when the executive branch fails, it is a responsibility of Congress to find out what happened. Not only just to find out what happened, but to make sure that that failure doesn't happen again. And we have certain institutions within our government, like the National Transportation Safety Board, that was originally set up as an independent operation to withstand political influence, but to look into transportation failures, whether it was a train crash, a airplane crash, highway safety, whatever the issue is around transportation and safety, that the National Transportation Safety Board is charged with correcting the problem so that it is not a recurrent problem for the people of the United States. You could say that the National Transportation Safety Board builds in integrity and accountability without the influence of politics into our transportation grid. And so for me, the first article that I wrote about 911 was about actually it happened because I learned that both George W. Bush and Dick Cheney were trying to stop an investigation. And what they did, it was Tom Daschle was the majority leader at the time in the Senate, and they both either went to him physically or placed a phone call to him and said, don't investigate this. Now, for me, this is extremely odd, and this goes against the very responsibilities of the Congress. So how can you have, and this is the question that I asked, how can you have a military and an intelligence infrastructure that the people of the United States have invested trillions of dollars in, and it fails 4 times in one day? Mm-hmm. Now, that was my only question. And the idea that the highest levels of the U.S. government would plead, oh, let this just fall by the wayside, oh, let this go, went against the very nature of the purpose of the our government, the Congress, and institutions like the National Transportation Safety Board. So in that very first op-ed that I wrote, which, by the way, I would like to find. It was published by the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, which I call, well, I won't tell you what I call on the air. I call it on the air. And it was, but it was a reprint from, it was the Washington Post that, actually printed it first. And so I said, I likened what happened on September 11th to a national tragedy, say a train wreck, an airplane crash, which would immediately activate the National Transportation Safety Board.
Right.
And there would be a thorough investigation of exactly, was it a airplane failure? What was it? Just exactly. We know what we saw, but we don't know how it happened. And so the National Transportation Safety Board would be one of those entities that would automatically be activated. And yet at the highest levels, you had interference in the process of investigation. And so that is what piqued my interest and went against the very grain of how we can make sure that something like this never happens again if it were truly an accident, a lapse in judgment, a lapse in the defenses of the U.S., then you want to make sure, for sure, that you're protecting the lives of the people of the U.S. And also the investment by taxpayers into an infrastructure, because if that infrastructure doesn't work, then all that money has gone to waste. And one of the things my dad told me was that always that taxpayers' money, you treat that like your own money and you never vote for a tax increase. I mean, it's just like, this is one of the things that you demand, responsibility and accountability and integrity for taxpayer dollars. Then the second thing that was unusual that hit me was that every member of Congress was given a piece of paper that had talking points on it. Mm-hmm. And this was the official narrative, and we were supposed to stick to those talking points. Now, I'm extremely inquisitive. And so if you don't answer my questions, then I'm just like a bulldog with a darn bone, and I'm just not going to let it go. And this is what was happening. The talking point said we were hit because we were free. Now, that was insufficient for my inquiring mind. Mm-hmm. And I certainly was not going to go back to my constituents and say we were hit because we were free. But now remember, that was what the president said. That was the line. That's what everybody said, which doesn't answer the question, how did it happen? We know what we saw, but how did what we saw actually happen?
Well, right. And here it is. Your questions are coming from the motivation of somebody who is trying to take responsibility based on the fact that you were entrusted, with doing so, in my estimation,
Yes.
This was you doing your job.
I was doing my job. And, I always did my job. And it's also from the inquiring mind, plus my penchant for research. Like, really honestly, on the Hill, the situation is that the members of Congress are off, on their trips to gambling, going to the casinos and doing this and doing that and playing basketball down in the gym or, in the ladies' gym or whatever. And it's really the staff that run the show. But no, not for me. I did my homework. I did my research. And then I guess this is the third thing that I recognized was that as I was trying to understand how we came to see what we saw on September 11th, I searched newspapers around the world because of the access of the internet, I could read the Scotsman, the Melbourne Age, the Haaretz was a source that I went to in Israel. And so I could go around the world and I could learn more about what was known about how it happened than the U.S. newspapers were reporting. This was the strange thing. So when the issue of foreknowledge came up, it was because I was reading the press from around the world, and they were, like, for example, Egypt would say, well, we communicated our concern about the rumors that we were hearing to the administration. And you had the Israelis saying, well, we communicated our concern to the administration. So you had all of these warnings that were being discussed in the international press. And so when I went on the KPFA, Pacifica News Network show, and did the interview, I acknowledged that I was aware that there were warnings that had gone into the administration, the George W. Bush administration, and those warnings were ignored. Now, that was when everything, the wall just, crashed on me. And the wall crashed on me, I believe, for a reason. And that was because I had ventured from a place of institutional power. I ventured into an area where only a select profile of congressperson could go. If I went into this danger zone of truth, then I might go all the way to wherever the evidence led me, as opposed to wherever the convenience was for the institutions to protect themselves from embarrassment, and then at some level, actual cover up.
Well, and that's the thing, that you went off script is what happened. This is what I'm understanding. And the script was handed to you via the talking points that you described, which, people think that that's something that's made up. It absolutely wasn't. I mean, we heard it straight out of the president's mouth. They hate us for our freedoms, right? Yes. This was disseminated in the media. So you were not only off script so far as the political structure was supposed to guide everybody who was a public figure at that point in time. There was a grand sentiment in this country that, that if you spoke against it, you were practically an enemy of the state publicly, in any way, shape, or form. And all you were doing was your job.
I was doing my job. That's all I was doing. I was doing my job, because when the president and everybody said that we don't want this to ever happen again, well, I understood that viscerally. No, I don't want this to happen again. But how can you prevent something from happening again if you don't know how it happened to start?
Well, that's a little something called logic right there. Okay. And I got to tell you that, again, becoming so disillusioned with what I've observed over the years, not just on this topic, obviously, but I mean, regarding just about everything, it seems like the Congress has been placed in a position, and look, I bluntly stated it, I mean, being bought and paid for by a lot of different interests, it really is irrelevant what the actual function of things is supposed to be, what the truth is supposed to be. Okay, you're supposed to stick to a script. You're supposed to only read, the summations of your staffers, not really know even what you're signing. Okay, I mean, and all of it is this culture of really non-participation by the majority of people that are supposed to be our representatives. It's right there in the title. That's right. That's right. And yeah. Go ahead. No, but I want you to go ahead from that, because that's what the difference is. This is why I said what I said at the top of this hour, is that I watched somebody do their job, or at least try to, okay, despite the fact that the culture of the political structure was against it, despite the fact that the media was against it. You were still trying to do that. And I mean, what was the immediate, blowback really for you? What can I say? The visceral reaction that you received for attempting to do your job. And I only say attempting, not that you attempted and couldn't achieve it. I say attempted in that you were stifled in this way. You were not allowed to pursue that which you felt was your duty to do so. But so when I say tried, it's not through failure of yours. But I absolutely understand. And of course, it was extremely painful, because it was just like it came from out of nowhere, because it was a responsible thing. It was a responsible question to ask. We've made this investment, for crying out loud. If you would get out of your emotionalism for a minute and get into the logic of what happened, the primary function of the Pentagon is power projection. And yet on that particular day, it couldn't even protect itself. Right. Here you've got an institution that projects power all over the planet, and it couldn't protect itself. So here you have a huge institutional failure. And Zell Miller, son of Georgia, called me loony. And Max Cleland, son of Georgia, said that I didn't know what I was talking about. And that is what was probably more hurtful, not necessarily from Zell Miller, because everybody knows about Zigzag Zell, or at least all of us Georgians, we know about Zigzag Zell. But for Max Cleland to jump on, it's like, even in football, when you hit the quarterback or you hit another team player, the opposite team player, out of bounds, it's called unnecessary roughness. It's a penalty. And so those guys committed a penalty, because all I was doing was trying to protect my constituents and my country. But they saw a political opportunity. They jumped on it and criticized me for doing my job. And then what does Max Cleland do a few years later? He says it's a conspiracy. Nobody criticized him when he said it. He was praised for it. Well, the winds had shifted by then, right? So,
The winds had shifted. But at the same time, to be honest with you, I have to also say that there is the history and tradition of this country is that had I been a white man saying it, it was okay. Because there were white men who came after me and who said it. And they were okay. Look at Senator Bob Graham today. He's a champion of the left and the right. He's the champion. But he hasn't said anything more than I said. But, And then the feeble-minded among our people who were persuaded by the press,
right.
Washington Post, Juliet Eilperin, and you see, I've studied COINTELPRO. So I know about the role of the press in lying to the people for either personal or institutional prerogatives. And so Juliet Eilperin of the Washington Post was the one who wrote the story about conspiracy theory. And then from there, it was just all over.
Mm. You know, that's an interesting point. I did not even consider that they were attacking you or being successful in their attacks because you were black or a woman. I didn't consider it that way at all. I just thought that since you were against the script, that was it.
I was against the script, but I was against the script, and out of my place. Out of my place, because I was supposed to be quiet. It's bad enough to be elected, right? And then to be elected and get, because my election was celebrated by people who had been left out of the political system altogether. Remember, that first district that sent me to Washington was the second poorest district in the state. I had a responsibility. I went into the, roads that weren't paved, dirt roads. I went to people who didn't have running water in their homes. I knocked on doors where there was no running water in the house. I went to Glasscock County where a member of Congress had never set foot. That's a 99% white county that was in my district. I campaigned in every county because I wanted to be the people's representative. And I needed to learn what the issues and problems were of my constituents so I could adequately fend for them up there in Washington, D.C. in that, swimming in the sea of sharks, right? Mm. And so I went to my constituents. And that's why I believe today, among the people of those initial 22 counties, whether they're black, white, somewhat wealthy, and definitely for the poor, they remember that this was the first time that their member of Congress came to them. I don't know if a member of Congress has been to Glasscock County since.
Wow. Well, see, that's the thing. They're saying in the chat room and on Skype that, actually they really went after you also for asking questions, for having the courage to ask tough questions in Georgia as well. And I'm new to the state, to be honest with you. So I'm not aware of the other things that were going on there. I'm aware of the national, the big issue there. I mean, that's how I came to see you, was through that first. But as I've examined many of the things that you've written and said, what I hear over and over again is your desire to, your efforts to actually do the crazy thing, which is represent the people that you're supposed to represent, for their interest. And it didn't occur to me that, maybe it's because, look, I'm well aware of COINTELPRO, and I talk about all the time how, the Black Panthers to this day are still demonized, but they were in the crosshairs of that. They're the best example I have of that. And people think I'm crazy for bringing up the idea that, these were men that were looking to protect their community, and they forget that there was, breakfast being served to children before they went to school, and things like this as well. It's way beyond a beret and a firearm. All right.
Yes. Hey, but they were Second Amendment rights activists now, which gets me to my another one of my, you have to have the ability to analyze a situation and say, okay, well, maybe my position was manipulated. Maybe my position was wrong. And to grow and admit, okay, well, maybe I made a mistake. And so, if you look at my voting record, while I was in Congress, I was Chuck Schumer's darling, right? Let's, take away those guns, right? Mm. And then Hurricane Katrina happened, and I saw innocent people who were trying to flee floodwaters, right, being stripped by Homeland Security, and of all things, Blackwater, a private mercenary group, right, of their Second Amendment rights. And I said, well, wait a minute now. What's this all about? And so then I started rethinking my position on, do I want to see the government? Now, this is the same government that has failed with September 11th. This is the same government that is responsible for Waco, Ruby Ridge, the SWAT thing that killed one of the Puerto Rican independence guys in his home, and they made sure they killed him with blood running down the front porch of his house as they shot through the door, the window, everything to kill him. Right. And I'm saying, do I want to disarm myself for this government? And so I said, absolutely not. And so then I switched, and all of a sudden it was just like a switch got flipped, and I became pro Second Amendment. The Bill of Rights is in the Constitution for a reason. And now I'm one of the biggest Bill of Rights persons because, all those people who before were saying that the Constitution has been shredded. Well, it has been shredded. And the acceleration of the shredding of the Constitution came as a result of an event which I'm not even allowed to know the truth about. Imagine that. So, oh no. So I began another transformation. And so then I started reaching out to the people who have been talking about the Constitution and patriotism and all of that. I started reaching out to them because I thought, well, maybe they got a raw deal too. And so, remember Janet Napolitano came out and said that we're supposed to be afraid of the militia people, Christian identity people, people who have those kinds of beliefs. So I started reaching out to them because I wanted to know, do I need to fear you or do I need to fear my government?
No, that's right. That's right. But you know what? As you observed new information, you adjusted your positions based on that. What is the definition again of intellectual honesty? What is the definition again of someone who is attempting to evaluate a situation with integrity? You realized by observation that something is very wrong here in the equation. And, so therefore you adjusted your positions. It's not a matter of, again, it's not a matter of somebody paid you to do it. It's not a matter of, well, you know what, I think this is going to get me elected, so I'm just going to speak to it. You actually saw things change, and you saw things going in the wrong direction. Yes. And, well, that's another little obligation you're supposed to have when you're representing those people. You might want to protect their interests. Yes. First and foremost might be their lives, their liberty, and their ability to pursue happiness. Gee, that sounds familiar.
Yes.
Doesn't it?
Yes, that's all I have tried to do without without regard to the things that divide us. Because, in COINTELPRO, it's the April 4th, 1967 document, I believe, of COINTELPRO, there's this paragraph, and they state there the purpose of COINTELPRO. And this was, of course, the COINTELPRO against what they called the Black nationalist hate groups. Mm-hmm. And one of the things they wanted to play on was their ability to divide Black people from white people. And then, of course, divide Black people from Black people. So division within a community, division within the larger community as well. And this is what they were sowing. So then I decided that if they were sowing division, then I needed to be on the other side of that too, and try to sow some cooperation, some understanding. Mm-hmm. And so now I've gotten, I have been received. I've spoken to, maybe I shouldn't say it on the air, but I've spoken to members of the militia. I've spoken to Christian Identity. And so at least this segment of the population, they know my name. They know who I am. They know I've tried to communicate. And also what I wanted them to know is I'm not going to paint your community with a broad brush. Don't paint my community with a broad brush. Let's try and figure out, we're all Americans and we want the best for our children and our communities, our neighborhoods, and our country. So let's try to figure out the things that we have in common, and let's focus on that rather than what divides us, because we know what divides us. But what we're less familiar with, that path-breaking terrain, is that which unites us.
Oh, absolutely. And this is the message that I do believe needs to be heard loud and clear, and as many times as we have breath to repeat it. That there is an us and them. Okay, there yes. truly is.
Yes.
But there is a whole lot, many more colors in the us yes. than they want us to believe. There is a whole lot more spiritual belief systems in the us yes. than yes. they want us to believe. And the us is really who is in trouble here, because we're not being represented. Okay, we're not being heard. We are being swept aside. And if we don't begin to take responsibility and remember that in the power structure, in the true power structure in this country especially, we are supposed to be at the top of that pyramid. The government is supposed to serve us. We are not meant to serve them. Okay? And those that we do choose to be representatives of us should adhere to the will of the people. Again, I know it sounds like, gee, he just keeps saying the same thing over and over again. But I also say that we entrust them to look out for our best interests. True. Based on newly emerging information, based on situations that change. Look, things have evolved in the post 9/11 reality. Okay? And that, I'm very sure, you got something to say about as well. Because, like you said, the Constitution being shredded based on an event, that has caused not only a loss of our own personal freedoms, a loss of our own personal security. I mean, you're saying that you've had communication with people that you would describe loosely as militia people?
Yes.
Well, you do understand that has been collected and databased, and I'm sure that there have been many people that have looked at that. So, that is the way of things nowadays, right?
Yes, that's a very dangerous thing to do. And let me tell you something else, another revelation that I've had, just because, I've been privileged to serve the people of this country. And I used to think that women would make a difference. I used to think that if you elected more women to office, that we would have a less belligerent foreign policy, and that we would have a more nurturing, I guess, domestic policy that would take care of the children and seniors and, do the kinds of things that women, at least at one time, were known to do.
Effectively, if there was a greater feminine presence in the government, we would have a more empathetic posture that came from the government, right? And you know what? I used to think that way too.
Well, I thought, yes, that's right. And now look at the woman that we have that just won. Well, I don't even know if she actually won, because there's still 2 million votes that need to be counted in California. But there's a professor, June Terpstra. She wrote a piece. It really opened my eyes, and it was called "The Hollow Women of the Hegemon." And her last name is Terpstra, Terpstra, Terpstra. And she wrote this piece, and I read it back in, I think 2008, she wrote that piece. And basically what she was saying is, beware these women of the hegemon, because they're not the genteel women, the nurturers that you think, the empathetic policymakers that you think women are, but they're the hard ones, like Margaret Thatcher and Madeleine Albright, Condoleezza Rice, Susan Rice. And she named Hillary Clinton back in 2008 when she wrote this. She named Hillary Clinton. And so, yes, absolutely right. These good leadership doesn't have a gender and it doesn't have a race on it. It's something that comes from within, that someone is so dedicated and committed to values and principles and the people that they won't compromise those values and principles. They won't compromise for the policies for personal gain. They just won't do it.
No, that's absolutely the truth. And I almost felt I was kind of smiling here while you were talking, because I felt like maybe you had heard the first hour where I started talking about Hillary. Because quite honestly, I said just about the same thing. I said, I don't care, how many slightly, let's call them liberal, progressive, whatever's allegedly social policies she seems to embrace. Effectively, you're looking at a warmongering neocon, and there's nothing genteel or empathetic in her presentation, and that's just what she's allowed to be publicly accessible at this point. Who knows exactly how deep that goes? But, if you're looking for something kinder and gentler, to borrow a phrase from an earlier time, you certainly would not expect it from the alleged female, candidate. And I don't mean to say alleged female candidate. I should say female alleged candidate. But either way.
Yes.
For the selection process. Yeah.
Yes. So, when you talk about, I just posted on my Twitter, I do Facebook and Twitter. I know that Facebook is, the CIA, Facebook and Google for that matter, are, the CIA's babies. And,
wonderful intelligence collection devices for all of them, yeah.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are. But it's also been a way for me to reach people that I would never have been able to reach before. And so I use Facebook. My Facebook page is Cynthia McKinney Official. And so I would invite the audience to go and interact with me on the Facebook page. But I just tweeted that the United States government has neocons embedded in it. And, you know, this is a result of the 50 quote unquote diplomats that sent the letter saying, finish the regime change in Syria. And so this is more warmongering. And incoming, the Department of State is for diplomacy. It's not for war making. So these people who are embedded inside the diplomatic apparatus of the United States of America, they're in the wrong place if they want to go make a war. So that means that these embedded neocons have turned every apparatus of the state into a war-making machine to achieve their particular objectives. And so I tweeted about it, and someone responded, she believes that there's neocon sleeping cells. You know, people have a way of twisting everything, right?
Of course.
Well, the fact of the matter is that I have just finished perusing, and I'm going to study it line by line. You thought that the Project for a New American Century, the PNAC boys, were done and over with. No, they are not. They have reorganized themselves, changed their name from Project for a New American Century to Center for a New American Security. They've issued yet another paper. Now remember, if you go back and you look at rebuilding America's defenses, you see the blueprint for what exactly is happening today with the U.S. military written in that paper from the 1990s. So the Project for a New American Century, those people are firmly embedded in the policymaking apparatus of the United States of America. This this latest paper is extending American power. Now, you would think that we're already overstretched in terms of the wars that we are fighting. And why are we fighting these wars in the first place? We're literally, as you and I have this conversation, the United States military is bombing Afghanistan, Pakistan, Syria, Libya, Somalia, and Yemen. They've already divided the country of Sudan. And so, how much more death and destruction are the people of the United States going to become responsible for? Because after all, these are our tax dollars that are being used to kill people and destroy whole countries. So they're not satisfied. And who are the people I'm talking about? I'm talking about none other than we've got Victoria Nuland, who is Hillary's girl in Ukraine, leading the regime change and the destabilization there. And so they say, well, we've got to consolidate our victory in Ukraine. And these crazy people, Robert Kagan is Victoria Nuland's husband. And so these crazy people are advocating war against Russia, containment of China. You know, the U.S. military is deploying ships right now to antagonize China in where? Not in the Pacific Ocean or in the Atlantic, which are right at our shores, in the South China Sea. This kind of madness makes absolutely no sense. And then they lie. They lie about the narrative. So,
well, see, that was the thing that I was just thinking while you were speaking to all this and talking about the different engagements, which, by the way, you didn't even mention Iraq, right?
Oh, my gosh, that's right.
Which is still going on. But here's the thing. This is just what we actually can confirm at this moment. Right. There are some people that estimate that we are actually involved actively in hot activities in something like 24 countries, okay? Yes. Which is insanity in my estimation. The American empire, excuse me, I know I'm using some slightly hyperbolic language here, but to me it seems like the American empire. The military presence, whether it is allegedly peaceful or it is just an installation or it is some sort of activity, training exercise, whatever, we are virtually in 90% of all nations that exist on the planet.
That's exactly right. And so now these same people who have orchestrated that are now writing a paper, and they are in a position to implement this. They're talking about extending American power. Now, here's the next thing. My mother and my next door neighbor don't benefit from the extension of power that these people are talking about. You and I don't benefit. But there is a very small political class that do benefit. And so the United States of America as a state, as a country, is being destroyed by these people who are benefiting, and we will be left holding the bag of a country that is completely spent and reviled and hated around the world.
And merely to satisfy the agenda of a very small minority. Cynthia McKinney, it has been an extreme privilege. We are just about out of time tonight, but I hope that this is just the first in a series of discussions I'll be able to have with you. It is extremely informative, and I'm sorry if the rest of the listeners don't get it. All I hear is integrity oozing out of everything you're saying, and many subjects I did not get to. But please tell the listeners where they can get in touch with you, get involved in any way, shape, or form in these last couple of 30 seconds here, if you wouldn't mind.
Okay, on Facebook, I'm Cynthia McKinney Official, and on Twitter, I'm just Cynthia McKinney. Find me there or find me on allthingscynthiamckinney.com.
That's right, allthingscynthiamckinney.com. And thanks to Derrick Grayson for being in my first hour. The Ochelli Effect is done. Stay tuned to American Freedom Radio, though I'm sure it'll get more interesting as we go.